Across the African savanna, the martial eagle searches from above, surveying a landscape where every movement can reveal an opportunity. From a high vantage point, its vision turns the open grassland into a vast hunting ground. When the moment comes, the eagle leaves its perch and begins a patient search across the plains. Much of the hunt is not the chase at all, but a long sequence of watching, waiting, and adjusting. Below, the herd moves through the grass, unaware that a predator is watching from far above. The distance closes slowly. The eagle changes its line, testing the opportunity without wasting energy. For the young impala, the danger arrives almost silently, carried on wings above the grass. In a brief burst of power, the martial eagle commits to the strike. The hardest part is not the strike, but lifting and carrying the weight away from the ground. With the prey secured, the eagle turns toward the nest, carrying the result of the hunt back across the living landscape. The nest lies ahead, high above the grass, where the hunt will become food for the next generation. For the young impala, the danger arrives almost silently, carried on wings above the grass. At the nest, every movement becomes deliberate. The heavy landing must be controlled on a narrow branch. For the growing chick, the return of a parent can mean the difference between hunger and another day of growth. The prey is no longer a prize. At the nest, it becomes nourishment. For now, the nest is both shelter and classroom, a protected place in which strength is slowly built. Between fading trips, the adult remains alert, watching the territory around the nest. The cycle begins again. The adult leaves the nest to search for the next meal. For a hunting eagle, survival is measured in thousands of small observations: a movement in the grass, a shape beneath a tree, a chance worth investigating. In this landscape, patience is part of the hunt. The search continues across familiar ground, where every change in the grass can conceal another opportunity. From above, the eagle can cover ground while spending little energy, waiting for movement below. The savanna is crowded with life, but only some movements are worth the predator's attention. Its most important tool is not speed, but extraordinary vision, combined with the ability to wait. A successful hunter must also know when to move on. Its territory stretches across a patchwork of grass, trees, and open hunting ground. Sometimes a hunting trip ends without food. The cycle simply continues. Inside the nest, growth is becoming visible. The young eagle is beginning to test the wings it will one day depend upon. These early exercises are awkward, repetitive, and essential. The young bird now has more than food to learn from. Every movement of the parent becomes part of its changing world. The nest is becoming too small for the young eagle, and the branches around it are now part of its training ground. Balance comes before confidence. Each uncertain step strengthens muscles that will soon carry the bird beyond the nest. Nearby, the adult continues to move through the territory, while the young bird begins to spend more time outside the nest. Practice is repetitive and imperfect. The young eagle must learn to control every movement of its growing wings. Soon, the young bird will have to cross the space that separates the nest from the surrounding world. The first flight is brief, uneven, and entirely real. A short flight is followed by a careful landing, and the young eagle pauses to recover. The nest is still a familiar refuge, even as the young bird begins to explore beyond it. The parent continues its movements through the territory, returning again and again to the same nesting place. Beyond the nest, the young eagle begins to learn the shape of its own territory. The young eagle is beginning to spend more time alone, watching the landscape from its own perches. Learning to hunt begins long before the first successful strike. Every movement below becomes information, and every quiet pause is part of learning. The adult still commands the airspace above, while the younger bird gradually learns to use the landscape below. With each flight, distance becomes less difficult, and control becomes more precise. A new perch brings a new view, and with it, a little more independence. The young bird is no longer confined to the nest, but the familiar territory still connects its movements to the adult. Sooner or later, the young eagle must turn these practiced movements into a way of finding food. The landscape that once surrounded the nest is becoming a landscape the young bird can navigate for itself. The nest is still nearby, but the young eagle is beginning to live beyond its boundaries. The young eagle now travels farther from the nest, carrying with it the skills developed through months of dependence. Finding food requires more than strength. The young hunter must learn which movements are worth investigating. Practice continues away from the nest, where every flight demands a little more control. The young eagle is beginning to recognize the landscape not as a nursery, but as a hunting territory. Above it, the adult continues the same ancient routine, moving across the territory in search of food. The old nest remains part of the landscape, even as the young bird spends less time within it. Each departure makes the boundary of dependence a little smaller. Not every movement leads to a hunt. Learning also means knowing when to wait. Flight is becoming efficient, and the young eagle can now travel farther with less effort. The distance from the nest is no longer measured in branches, but in the confidence to travel alone. The young martial eagle is now traveling through the territory on its own, no longer dependent on the nest for every decision. Finding food requires more than strength. The young hunter must learn which movements are worth investigating. The movements are becoming more deliberate now, shaped by repetition rather than instinct alone. The adult continues its own routine, while the younger eagle gradually develops a routine of its own. The awkward flights of the nest have become purposeful journeys across the savanna. For the first time, the young eagle can look across the landscape without the nest defining its world. For the adult, the cycle continues: search, hunt, return, and survive in a landscape that is always changing. And above this ancient landscape, one young eagle has taken its first steps toward an independent life. Independence does not arrive in a single flight. It is built through countless journeys across familiar ground. From each new perch, the young eagle adds another piece to its knowledge of the territory. Not every attempt becomes a hunt. Failure is a part of learning too. With practice, the young bird is learning to spend the energy carefully, just as an adult hunter must. The adult remains shaped by the same demands, maintaining its feathers, conserving energy, and remaining alert. The hunter moves again, following a rhythm older than any single nesting season. Above and below, predator and prey remain part of the same constantly moving ecosystem. The old nesting tree remains a fixed point in the territory, even as the young bear begins to range farther away. A nest is more than a place to raise young. It is part of a territory that must be held, watched, and maintained. The distance between parent and young bear is now part of the natural process of becoming independent. Beyond the familiar nest, the young eagle is beginning to build a territory of experience of its own. Every landing now ends with greater control than the one before. The same landscape that once held a single vulnerable young impaler now becomes part of the young eagle's growing field of awareness. For the adult, the search for food remains a daily discipline. There is no guarantee that every fight will end with a meal. What matters is the ability to keep searching, conserving energy, and using the landscape efficiently. Above and below, predator and prey remain part of the same constantly moving ecosystem. With stronger wings comes a larger world. The restless movements of a nest have become the quiet vigilance of a young hunter. The place where the journey began is now only one small part of a much larger landscape. The young eagle is no longer learning where the territory ends. It is learning how to move through it. From this height, the young hunter can watch without revealing itself to the life below. Patience remains one of the most important skills to master. A young predator learns not only how to strike, but when a strike is worth attempting. The adult and young bird now occupy the same landscape without needing to share every moment within it. For the adult, the cycle of hunting continues as it always has. The nest remains quiet now, but still anchored within the adult's territory. A nest can hold the traces of a season long after the young bird has begun to move beyond it. The young eagle now carries the territory in its memory, not simply beneath its wings. The first season of dependence is ending, replaced by the quieter discipline of independence. The adult moves on, while the old nest becomes another landmark in the landscape. From a vulnerable chick in a high nest to a young hunter on the wing, survival is built one ordinary day at a time. A new day begins, and the young eagle moves through the territory without the protection of a nest. The young hunter now spends more time watching for itself, learning where opportunity may appear. The first lessons of hunting are often quiet ones, built from attempts that do not end in a kill. To survive here, the young eagle must learn not only the animals, but the landscape that holds them. The adult remains bound to the same practical routines, keeping its vitals in order, conserving energy, and watching the territory. For the adult, another hunting flight begins without ceremony. Farther from the nest, the young bird is becoming a familiar presence within the territory. The landscape remains the same, but the young eagle's place within it has changed. One generation continues the work of survival, while another begins to carry those skills forward. The nest has provided shelter, the territory has provided lessons, and now the young eagle must continue the journey alone. The young eagle disappears into a landscape it has learned to read for itself. From a high nest to the open sky, survival has never been a single moment. It is a process of learning, adapting, and finally moving on.